O greatest of kings. Let whichever of your knights is boldest of blood and wildest of hearts step forth and try with honor to land a blow against me. Who is willing to engage with me? One year hence.
In the central syllabus of Indonesia, the people of Poso tell how the creator used to send things down to the first people by a rope from his nearby sky home. Once, he sent down a stone, and the people rejected it as useless. The creator pulled up the stone and lowered a banana instead, and the people rushed to take it. Then, the voice of the creator called down and scolded the people for their foolishness. Had they accepted the stone, he said, they would have achieved its solidity and immortality. But having chosen the banana, they had chosen its mortality and had introduced death into the world. So The Green Knight is a 2021 depiction of the Arthurian fairy tale by the same name, The Green Knight, directed by David Lowery. The story follows Sir Gawain on his journey to knighthood. And the film uses a lot of imagery of stone and nature, green, being oppositional forces that must be utilized for Gawain's development. Or at least that those forces are crucial to how we're going to be telling the story of his development. And so in this video, I'm going to break down what some of that imagery means, and in the process, I hope to further define the message of the film. So first, let's become familiar with the two elements, stone and nature. And we're going to do that by looking at a monologue on the color green by Alicia Vikander.
Green is what is left when ardor fades, when passion dies, when we die too. When you go, your footprints will fill with grass. Moss shall cover your tombstone, and as the sun rises, green shall spread over all. This verdigris will overtake your swords and your coins and your battlements, and try as you might, all you hold dear will succumb to it. Your skin, your bones, your virtue.
Pleasant, right? Now here's a speech from King Arthur just before the titular character arrives. Just be thinking about the stone imagery in relation to what we just heard.
Brothers and sisters all, I thank thee for breaking bread with me this blessed day. For out my window this morn I looked, and I saw land shaped by your hands. You have laid those same hands upon our Saxon brethren, who now in your shadow bow their heads like babes. Peace you brought to your kingdom. So it is in peace that I now say to you that I am the luckiest here today, because I am amongst thee. I am amongst thee.
So immediately we can see how these two forces, nature and the green versus the knights and the kingdom, how they exist in opposition to each other. It's the unwavering character of the knights that places the stone of the kingdom, you know what I mean, their stone, unwavering character, that's creating a slab for prosperity to be built on top of. But no matter how many barbarians they defeat, enemies they vanquish, the ultimate and unavoidable foe of the kingdom is green. Because the green, no matter how hard you try, will always creep up from the inside, from in between the stones. And I think we actually even get a taste of that process with the monologue from King Arthur. Because it actually seems like he falters a little bit on the speech, and it seems like his hubris is actually what's summoning in the Green Knight. You know, he has this thing about that the entire land is now shaped by their hands, you know, and he's pretty cocky about it. And I think that nature, in response, is going to show him that he's being too confident, that right now she has his grip on him. And so, what we see in this scene, you know, we know that King Arthur is a great king, and so what we see in this scene with him making a mistake is we're seeing the age well on him and turn him into not such a great king. And I think you actually even see this in the beginning of the scene, because when he starts off the speech, he's kind of just wandering off, almost like he's following the scent of a ghost, you know what I mean? He just goes, all right, who next then? And gets up and then starts just rambling off. But anyway, so even King Arthur, who, like I said, has defeated dragons, can't defeat the green that's growing in between his neurons.
Like 2/3.
So with the king being consumed by the green, it needs a new one. And that's where Sir Gawain comes into the picture. Now, they do a really interesting thing here, because the film starts off with a fire in the distance, and you see a brave character get on his horse, kiss his wife, and then goes off to face the blaze. But this is not our hero. As I said, it's his journey to knighthood. So we kind of pull back, and we see Gawain laying there, you know, the drips sounding like the clock ticking as he's oversleeping into the morning. You know, his destiny's leaving him, and I love the way that he has to be woken up by the water and not the call to adventure that's right there outside. Because they kind of get at this, and this is moves along with the idea of being green, you know what I mean, being new to something, being green. It's also the idea that you're kind of natural, and that you have an animalistic element, you know what I mean, you're kind of unsocialized in a way. And so he has to be woken up by water. He has to be pulled to follow his girlfriend by money. You know, and it's basically saying that he's not driven by things that are distant in the future. He's driven by the here and now, what he wants now. And again, this is the qualities of what we say that person is acting like an animal. They're acting green. They're acting like nature. And so he returns home. We realize that it's Sunday, it's church, and he missed church because he wanted to be out drinking in brothels. And we get introduced to his mother, who is a powerful witch. Again, this is all fitting together with the nature idea. Because the thing about mothers, and this is just kind of on average, this isn't saying anything particular or straightforward, but mothers tend to tilt into the, mothers kind of tilt towards unconditional love.
You do smell like you've been at mass. What, have you been drinking the sacrament all night?
Which is fine. I think there's something to the idea of unconditional love, but the fact is that she's accepting Gawain in every sort of way that he manifests himself. So a good example of this is that in the Greek creation story, where you have Uranus and Gaia, Gaia keeps producing monsters and heroes of all sorts, and kind of pisses him off. And so Uranus moves in and says, no, some of these things are good, some of these things are bad, we have to differentiate. And some of these things need to be rewarded, some of these things need to be punished. And anyway, so you can kind of already see how Judgment of Dad fits more into that category versus Judgment of Mom, who is always more forgiving. And so being a single mother, the son that she creates kind of is like an uncut bush. It's wild, it's all directions, it's big, but with no trimming. And I think you also have this idea of nature. When you look at a bush, everything's kind of relying on each other. You know what I mean? All the sticks and branches are weaved together. But you know, when you see a rock, you know, imagine like a rock or mountain out in the desert, it supports itself. It's independent. It stands. It doesn't need vines to weave together to hold it up. I'm not sure if that exactly fits, but it speaks to me, you know, anyways. But all this is about to change once King Arthur gets put into his life. So on Christmas Day, Gawain goes to the kingdom, and something different happens. The king invites him to sit right next to him. He's never done this before, and he partly holds himself accountable, saying that, you know, it's my fault for never reaching out and being there, which is, like, probably a little bit of a weight off Gawain's shoulders, you know. And then the queen reminds him, you know, it's okay that you're kind of, like, not put together right now, because, you know, you're still young, and your future's still ahead of you, and this is just the normal course of things, which is nice to hear.
You have none to tell yet. Look around you, young Gawain. What you see, do not take your place amongst them idly.
Which I think is kind of like the healthy form of unconditional love. You know, it's more like, I know you can do better than where you are right now, and I love what I see in you. That part that can be good. And I feel like it's worth noting that it's Gawain's honesty and humbleness before the king and queen that allows him to receive their wisdom. He doesn't lie and tell a tall tale about how awesome he is, and, you know, he doesn't get up there and sort of like, whatever, like, spit on you, you're not that special, we're the same, you know what I mean? He recognizes how actually small he is compared to the king's virtue. And him exposing his meager self, telling the king, actually, I haven't done anything cool my whole life. Him saying that and genuinely exposing his honest self is what allows him to build a relationship with the king and actually receive his wisdom. So that's useful to know. So a quick recap of the game. The Green Knight comes in. He basically says, someone duel with me. Wherever they hit me, and a year later, I'll hit them in the same spot. And with that, they will earn honor, they will earn my axe, and they will be a great hero and a great knight. Gawain volunteers, King Arthur gives him Excalibur, and at the last moment, the Green Knight stops, puts out his neck, and presents it. And part of the game is to play honorably. So, you can't just like nick him on the shoulder and be like, well, that's honor. It's like, no, the man presents you his neck, you go for the neck. And he does just that, foolishly, not realizing what he's doing. And that's what sets off the whole rest of the journey. So then after he does this, a year later, it's time. And so he has to leave the kingdom. But before he does, his mom makes kind of a weird promise to him. She says that if you take this green band and put it around your waist, it'll protect you from all harm. Now, this is a weird mystical world. So like, hey, maybe, but it's a little bit hard to believe because Gawain is literally going to have his head chopped off. How could he not come to harm? So on his journey, before he gets to the chapel, he is faced with a number of trials. In the first one, we really see how small he is and how far away he is from a knight just getting started because he's bested by a bunch of small thieves. Literally small. And immediately they cut that magical band off of him and take it, shoving his childhood beliefs into the dirt. And before they leave, they tie Gawain up and take his great axe. And the thief promises that he's going to commit terrible horrors with it. So not only has he failed, but his foolish bombast has now led to the harm of others. And so he's going to need to cleanse himself before returning on this journey. In the next scene, we meet a ghost who had her head removed and cast into the lake nearby. And we can already see the connection of Gawain's axe being lost into the hands of a thief who probably cut off someone's head. Now in this scene, he's meets the victim, essentially. Doesn't really matter if it was literally her, if it wasn't. Time doesn't really matter, is the best way. What matters is the core action of reconciliation. He fucked up and he's reconciling the mistake. And she asks Gawain to do this because, well, she believes he's a knight. And a knight just does things because it's the right thing to do, not for anything in return. Which is good, And then Gawain dives into the pool, and the audience is given a time to reflect and sort of cleanse ourselves of everything we've seen. And he literally cleanses his body, and he goes to the depths, finds her skull, and then merges up clean conscience and clean body. And once he does this, he's also returned the axe. And so we see very directly that, this world, it's a weird world. It doesn't function directly off the logic that we might be accustomed to. But frankly, it's the more accurate logic. Because actually, I think that if he hadn't have done this and returned the head, even if he'd found the axe, I'm not sure if he would have the courage to pick it back up, being afraid that he's going to do the same mistake. In the final test, the picture of what these trials are about comes into fuller focus. Gawain is asked to forego his greatest desires and move towards his greatest fears. I'm sure many of you listening are already seeing the analogy of the rock and stability with this test. He finds a mysterious cottage in the woods. The best way to think about this is like the Hansel and Gretel cottage. There he's offered shelter, easily attainable status, a no-strings-attached relationship with Alicia Vikander, and endless meat from her husband. And the image of what this place is, I think, best reveals itself with its opening. We see Gawain laying in the bed in a warm, green, cushioned womb, is the best way to say it. And the green band, we can see from this line moving all the way from the top of the frame to around his waist, is like the umbilical cord. You know what I mean? He's still trapped in his mother's womb, in his mother's basement, where he gets everything he needs, all the comfort, the warmth, and the shelter. And this is that place to the extreme. And later we get a scene that is truly perfect for the 21st century. Now, Alicia Vikander is some type of specter. And we kind of know this because, well, she's exactly identical to his girlfriend, but it's not his girlfriend, it's someone else. And you also get this weird thing where there's a weird blindfolded lady standing behind her at all times, and he never questions it. And I don't think he questions it because he loves the situation so much. Why look at a gift horse in the mouth, So she sits on him and promises that she can give him everything that he wants. I can't go too much into detail here. Maybe best to watch it if you haven't seen it. But after the climax of the scene, he's left alone. And he's left alone with his own seed, by himself. And suddenly he turns over and sees the old blindfolded lady standing right there watching him. Okay, what does all this mean? Alicia Vikander is not real. She's a specter. She's a ghost. She's a fantasy. He's in his mom's house. There's an old lady watching him be with this fantasy. He's in his mom's house. After this little fiasco, he hits rock bottom and decides to leave. And so again, he's pulling himself from his greatest desires, moving into his greatest fears, which is death. And when he arrives, the game essentially allows him two choices. They don't say this, but it's the game of life, and you can make decisions. He can either submit himself to death and die right there, feeling like he might have been a fool, or he could lie. He could run away, go back home, tell everyone, hey, I faced the Green Knight, he let me live, or even better, I took that axe and went, showed him how that game is played. And then get all the riches and wealth of being an awesome hero and a great knight, and then goes on to run the kingdom. Yeah? Not quite. The status that he earns, or would earn, from a consequence of those lies is represented in the scene earlier, when he has his photo taken. Instead of it being a finely crafted, handmade painting with the heart and soul of a good artist in there, he has a cheap photo, an imitation. They use technology to craft something counterfeit, and it fits in the same spot, but it's inverted and kind of dark. And there's also an idea, I know Native Americans kind of believe this, that like when you have your photo taken, you don't want that because it's taking a piece of your soul with you. And I think that idea is linked with that it's capturing his perfect self and keeping him right there in a stasis. There's something about that that's incorrect, especially when he's so not perfect. You know? But in this alternate reality, after he lies, people believe him and start believing he's a great man and start constructing the kingdom around him to lean on him. But his core is not stone. It's still green. So what does this mean? Well, first we see his former girlfriend, who loved and supported him, was someone that he leaned on, but instead of returning to love and being there in her most difficult moment, he rips her heart from her love from her, so that he can use it to support the kingdom with an heir. He's pulling in other people and destroying them for his own support. And as it's revealed in the next scene, Gawain is actually unable to produce an heir. He can't perform. Because again, this image of this virile, strong man is just a facade. And for folks who are wondering, yes, running away from your problems does cause low testosterone and impotence. So after that, we see that he's seeking to expand his empire. And I think what he's doing is creating an outer stone body to compensate for his inner soft core. And this is sort of a common thing where you see with people who really fear death, who really fear their own mortality, they'll join up and identify with movements because those things will outlast them. And so if they can identify with that, they feel like they're not dying. And so oftentimes you see atheism leading to totalitarian movements. Or in this case, in Gawain's case, that he wants to expand the kingdom, probably in his name, to last 1,000 years. And one of the reasons why I know these wars are somewhat needless is that the people are turning against him. The cost of death that they are accruing is tarnishing the crown. And finally, we see something that's really bad. We see that he's unable to console his son in his final moments. So not only is his son like a symbol for all of the young men that he slaughtered for his own self, but his son is going to a place where Gawain has not been himself. And so when the boy looks into his eyes for reassurance, to be let know that everything's going to be okay, all he gets back is fear, which is terrible for both of them. And lastly, every last one of Gawain's loved ones leaves his side as the kingdom falls. And we see that what the Green Knight said, that, hey, I'm going to come back and hit you in the same spot, he wasn't lying. You can't avoid the Green Knight. The point is you only have an option about how you're going to face him. He's going to creep in. He's an unstoppable force. Death is inevitable. So after Gawain sees all this, sees the future that will manifest if he lies, he takes off the umbilical cord. He becomes an independent man, one that other people can rely on, and perhaps even a kingdom. And this is how he becomes like stone. He becomes a person who will not let his worst fears or greatest desires stop him from doing what is right. He is steadfast in his virtue. And what's interesting about this, and perhaps maybe the stone metaphor doesn't completely cover this, but he never gets rid of his fear or desire. But from the wisdom that he gains on his adventure, he discovers that his worst fear was not death, but not to face it. And he uses this fear productively to move towards his desire of becoming a knight. And just to wrap everything up, in the last shot, it's revealed that the Green Knight is actually a fabrication of the mother, the witch, and this whole thing is a game that she conspired with the king to turn Gawain into a man. The blindfolded woman in the house was literally Gawain's mother, and she had her son play this game because, well, she loves him and she wants the best for him and she wants him to develop and be a man, you know? That's not a bad thing. I know it's painful, but it's better on the other side. And so with all this, we can return back to that hallucinogenic trip in the middle of the film. I didn't really mention this, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Where you see these stone giants who sort of represent the ancestors. The giants are the ancestors, people who established the world before them. No longer gone, but they're still there. And something weird that when he speaks to them, they sing. And it's a timeless language. You know, it's an eternal language that they're in. And, you know, and Gawain asks them for a ride, and they reach out to pick him up, and he shakes. You know, he's like scared and buckles back, and they're like, oh, never mind then. And partly what this makes me think is that Gawain at any moment could have jumped and became a knight. It just took the courage and the resilience to. He could have at that moment, you know what I mean, if he was not afraid to be touched by greatness. But anyways, it's a great film. Check it out. David Lowery is a great filmmaker, and he did a tremendous job. Thank you for listening. I hope you got something from this, and I hope to see you again soon.